Welcome back to the Explanation Pro. Today I'll recap a psychological thriller war film called Mine. Spoilers incoming. The movie starts with the main character, Mike, preparing his sniper. His partner, Tommy, starts some small talk and mentions how they've been there for 3 months already. Mike then spots a convoy approaching and warns Tommy, who immediately turns and informs their superiors through his radio. Their superiors then tell them that their target should be in a black vehicle. Mike checks again and starts to hesitate when he sees that the vehicle is gray. Tommy then dismisses this and tells him that it's still the same model nonetheless. Suddenly, a group of people emerge from the other side and seemingly approaching the convoy. Mike notes that they must be performing a ceremony. The target is then confirmed and Mike is told to take a shot. He starts to take aim when a woman gets out from one of the carriages and approaches a young man that arrived with the target. Mike then realizes that the ceremony is actually a wedding, though he is still instructed to assassinate the target. He tries to take aim again but could never get a clear shot as the target stands behind the groom. Their superiors tell him to take the shot anyway, even if they kill the groom in the process. Mike hesitates and eventually lowers down his gun and lies to his superiors that he couldn't shoot as the target kept moving. One of the target's men notices the glare of his scope and finds out their exact location. A gunfight starts between the two groups while the target and the newlywed couple are escorted back to their vehicles before they escape. The two of them run away and hide as they try to request for rescue from their superiors. Mike then shoots far to distract the enemy, luring them away. The two snipers encounter a dust storm as they get told to go to the nearest village 5 hours away, where they will be rescued. They start their trek towards the village, most of which Tommy spent talking to keep himself and Mike entertained. After a few hours, they then spot two locals who are seemingly digging through the sand. They take this as a sign that the village is closer and continue to walk further. Mike catches a red sign with a skull and something written in Arabic. He then starts to realize that they're standing in a minefield. He tries to tell Tommy this but his partner remains dismissive about it. Tommy tells him that he shouldn't give in to his paranoia and starts to get annoyed. Further into their hike, Tommy starts to complain that he's out of water. Mike also finds a toy soldier with half its body deep under the sand. He also gives his canister to Tommy, who drinks out of it. After that, Tommy tosses the canister back to him and starts to playfully march backwards. He notices that Mike is lost in thought again and teases him for overthinking, almost tripping as he continues to march backward. Tommy accidentally steps on a landmine and detonates it. Out of reflex, Mike steps forward to reach for his partner but he hears a metallic sound. He freezes as he realizes that he too stepped on a landmine but stopped it from detonating by not taking another step with his foot. Mike calls out for Tommy before he sees his companion crying out in pain as he lies on the floor. Mike realizes that the explosion cut off both of Tommy's legs. Tommy starts to panic more as Mike tries to tell him to calm down and to go get his first aid kit. He even mentions Tommy's wife and son, which eventually gets through to him. Tommy grabs the syringe and injects himself with morphine to ease the pain. However, despite Mike's protests, he takes another one and injects it into his leg once again. Mike then asks Tommy to grab his radio and call their superiors. Tommy reaches for it and tries to contact them but Mike tells him that he should turn on his radio first. Tommy starts to ramble incoherently and eventually grabs a gun. Mike starts to contemplate just stepping away from the landmine he's on if it would mean that he can reach out to his partner. Tommy then points the gun at himself and shoots so Mike would stay put and not compromise himself. This sends Mike into a panic attack. Once he calms down, he kneels down and takes out his knife before digging it deep under the sand. It hits something and he is certain that he stepped on a landmine. He then takes out a tomahawk and attaches it to a rope to reach for Tommy's bag, where his radio is. Mike tries to turn the radio on but realizes it would need batteries. He doesn't find any in the bag and realizes that they're inside Tommy's pockets. He instead uses the solar panel to charge the radio, which takes some time. Once it's charged, he manages to contact his superiors, albeit with some struggle. He explains his situation about stepping on the landmine and requests to be extracted from the desert. His superior then tells him that if he can't reach the village, then he would have to wait for 52 hours before their convoy arrives. Mike complains that that would be a very long wait. His superiors then say that old landmines sometimes malfunction due to their age. They also start to teach him a maneuver that may help him stay alive even if he detonates the mine, however the signal starts to become faulty. His waiting time starts but his supplies quickly run out. He then sees a huge sandstorm approaching. Mike manages to brace for impact by covering his face and holding onto his backpack. After the storm, he finds out that Tommy's bag, which had the radio in it, flew farther away from him while his corpse moved closer. He then covered Tommy's face with his hat. He continues to wait but eventually grows impatient. He fires his gun in the air and calls for help. When no help arrives, Mike slowly points the gun at himself. Before he could pull the trigger, he sees a local passing by and calls for his attention. He eventually realizes that the local can understand English. While Mike repeatedly asks for some water in the radio, the local asks him why he stays there while walking towards him in a zigzag motion. This causes Mike to suspect that he knows where the mines are and may have even planted some of them. Mike also explains that he stepped on a landmine, hence why he can't just leave. The local takes Mike's canister but ignores his pleas to get the radio for him. He starts to leave while telling Mike that he should move on. Mike gets frustrated and thinks that the local doesn't completely understand his situation. After a while, Mike starts to grow so thirsty that he pees into one of his water bags and starts to drink it. Seconds later, he sees a little girl approaching toward him. The girl, like the local from earlier, walks in a zigzag motion. She hands Mike his water canister and he eagerly takes it. She also shows him a toy soldier and Mike shows her the one he found earlier. Mike starts to ask her to hand him the radio. She stays in place and this frustrates him, pushing him to yell at the child. The little girl then runs away immediately. He starts to wait again as the sun slowly sets. He eats some food while he listens to music. Once night falls, he starts a small fire. Mike then brings out his phone and swipes through pictures of his girlfriend, Jenny. He stops at a video of Jenny cheering him on. Later in the night, his fire goes out and a pack of wild dogs emerges from the darkness. They start to approach him, so he takes his gun and shoots at one of them. The wild dog gets thrown back and lands on another mine, causing an explosion far from him. In the morning, the local returns and watches Mike with a smile on his face. The local asks for his name before mentioning how lucky he is that despite all that happened to him recently, he is still alive. Mike then snaps at the local and accuses him of knowing and maybe even planting the mines there. The local laughs it off and says that that's not the case. Mike then asks again for the radio and the local gets it this time. However, he plays with it and doesn't hand it immediately. He then asks the soldier another series of philosophical questions, which ends up in Mike admitting that he joined the war because he had no one anymore. The local hands him the radio and tells him again to move on before leaving. For a moment, Mike hallucinates that the local is Tommy. Later on, Mike starts to hear voices even though no one else is there. He then starts to fully hallucinate Tommy, telling Mike to move on, as if he were still alive. During the night, his hallucinations become worse as he imagines that his father is calling on his cell phone. His vision of Tommy is ironically keeping him sane and reminding him of things to do and not to do, as well as what's real around him and what's not. The wild dogs arrive again and Mike says that his ammo isn't enough to take all of them down. Tommy then tries to convince him to do the maneuver to get out of his current position. He starts to follow Tommy's instructions and imagines getting struck by the mine's detonation when in reality, his leg was bit down by the dog. By morning, he has killed the dog and manages to contact his superiors. They tell him that the convoy is delayed for 17 hours and asks him if he can hold on for that long, but he answers that he can't anymore. His superiors then tell him that they called Jenny, though she and Mike don't manage to hold a conversation as the signal distorts once again. He slowly loses consciousness and starts to fall forwards, but the local catches him in time. The local also starts to treat Mike's wounds before telling him that he stepped on a mine before too. It exploded, cutting off his leg and killing his daughter. He explains that they used to look for mines and take them, replacing them with tin cans before selling them because they were poor. In the hospital, he says that he used to hear a song that told him to move on. He also gives Mike a tonic, which he warns may increase his hallucinations. The local then tells him in finality that he lost a lot just because of a landmine, but he eventually moved on. As the local leaves, Mike hallucinates that his daughter is walking beside him. More hallucinations start as he thinks back on his childhood with his abusive and drunkard of a father and his moments with Jenny. His superiors then contact him and ask him to make his location known so they can find him. He tries to call out to them, but it doesn't work. Mike finds a flare near him and reaches it with difficulty. As he's about to use it, armed men working for his assassination target arrive and start to attack him. He successfully takes all of them down while he thinks back on his arguments with Jenny. He hallucinates his father walking towards him from afar as he remembers his mother sick and dying on a hospital bed and telling him to let her go. The image of his father then gets close enough and hugs him. Mike watches as the convoy is almost disappearing from his view before looking back at the flare. He then starts to sing the song that the local apparently heard in the hospital before taking a step forward and off the mine. He gets confused when the mine doesn't explode, so he crouches down and starts to dig at the site. Mike then realizes that he actually stepped on a tin can. He opens the can and sees a toy soldier inside. He starts to lie down and laugh before reaching out for the flare. A red smoke comes out of it, making the convoy spot out his location and rescue him. The movie ends as Mike arrives at an airport and reunites with Jenny before proposing to her on the spot. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and also subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. See you in the next video.